Goofy Historians is the funnest place to learn about history. Or is it the funniest?
Welcome, everybody. This is a humorous history podcast, and we are the Goofy Historians. Please hit subscribe so you don't miss any great content. We'll go ahead and take a second now and do that. We'll wait. Okay, today we are going to talk about Native Americans, pre-contact, before Columbus and all the rest of the murdering, germ-carrying religious zealots arrived. So we got to start kind of with the, actually I want to start with the, oh, there goes my computer. That's crazy. Where's my notes? I want to start with the 4 types of archaeology, because this is something I didn't know, but I mean, it kind of makes sense. So there is, 4 types of anthropology. And actually, me and David Pike took an anthropology class in at NMSU, but I don't remember this. But anyway, the 4 types of anthropology are archaeological, cultural and sociological. Linguistics is its own discipline, and biological. And these are usually 4 separate disciplines, except in the United States. In the United States, an anthropologist studies all 4 and are trained in, and become experts in generally 1 or more of the disciplines. Why? Because Americans are overachievers. I don't know. Okay, so to start off with, we're headed to North America. How did we get here? What are the theories of migration to North America? Because we all know that civil man started in Africa, and they were around 50,000 years ago in Europe, competing with Neanderthals and all that. Now in North America, it starts out later. So there are theories of migration to North America. First one is the Beringia, Bering Strait area, through Alaska, because there was 2 glaciers and there was a free area, and they went down that way, or they could have went down on the sea. There's also some other theories that haven't gained as much traction, but migration from Europe, like through Greenland. Obviously the Vikings did that, but we're talking about well before that. And there's even some crazy kind of almost conspiracy theories about how they went to South America first, and there's genealogical evidence and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, the theory that has the most widely adopted is the Beringia, and correct me if I'm pronouncing that, Laura, incorrectly. Beringia. There you go.
Yeah. So the proverbial land bridge, right? That's what the first time I heard of the land bridge that brought over, the natives to the what we call the Americas. I mean, they didn't call it the Americas, obviously. They didn't know America Vesputin would come, 5,000 years, 20,000 years later. But they taught me that it was a land bridge, right? And that's how they got here. And then as soon as they passed over, this land bridge disappeared, and they're stuck, right? They're stuck, so they got to live here, right? And so in my mind, for all of these years, 60 years, I thought it was a literal bridge, right? It's like, the between Russia and the United States is only 50 miles, right? And if you count the little islands between Russia and United States, it's just like 5 miles, right? So I thought it was literally this little bridge between the two continents that you could like see water on either side, right? And they were like going across one by one with their pet mammoth, right? And they soon and there was like this giant bear on the other side, you know, and they had to fight the bear and get past that. And as soon as it was like something out of like Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? And they made it over, the bridge falls apart, and they go, oh, what are we gonna do? You go north, you go east, I guess. I'll go west, and you know, and it's not. I found out Beringia is like a continent.
Right.
It's like the Beringia is not a bridge. It's as big as Australia, right? It's huge, right? It's not. They couldn't see like the ocean from the other side. So yeah, they came over like 26,000 years. They came up from Africa into Beringia, which is like 20,000 years before God even created the world, right? It's like that's how it was, like pre-creation. So they had come over to this Beringia, like this thing, this continent that sort of connects Russia and North America today, but they couldn't get across because there was this ice. It was the end of the ice age. This ice thing was still there. So they got stuck in Beringia. Of course, they didn't know they were stuck because they were there for like 8,000 years, right? Before they set up shop in Beringia, right? But at the beginning of the Holocene period, which is what we're living in the Holocene period. As soon as that started, the ice started melting, which means it started flooding into Beringia, and like they had to get out because it was like, you know, living in parts of Florida today, it's just getting flooded, right? So they had to pick up shop, pack everything up, get their pet mammoths and their pet mastodons, you know, come on over, and then they had to decide. But it was, even when it was open for like a period of thousands of years. So it's not like they all came over like once. They came over in like different groups of people over the thousands of years.
Right.
And
I
the
think that's
reason
a
you
good.
know that is there's.
I was just gonna say
Go ahead.
that's a good segue to jump into the years. And it's so hard. So we got to talk a little bit about dates and how the estimates are just wild, plus or minus. But so okay, first I want to back up and talk about your bridge theory. Okay, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But I do have a joke about a bridge, because a bridge is just a road that has guts. All the other roads are like, oh, you're a bridge. Anyway, so
yeah, like the Tacoma Bridge.
They can't. They you know what? The more I learn about this and listen to the Great Courses lectures, they don't know. They don't know. But what they do know is that 12,000 years ago in New Mexico, Clovis man was hunting mastodons. It wasn't a pet. What you did was you got like 12 of your best friends together.
No, it wasn't a pet. I was joking.
I know you were joking.
They were hunting them, right?
Well, where's your skeleton? You know what I missed behind you is the skull that you used to have. Okay, so he's
still there. He's up by Jesus.
Oh, it is. Well, here's my thing.
It's hard to see him. Yeah,
I'm gonna keep coming back to this. So, primitive man he was primitive. You know, he wasn't dumb. He was adaptive. He was really actually pretty smart. So anyway, here's Clovis man, 12,000 years ago, the same time around in Turkey where Göbekli Tepe was happening. Clovis man, what he did, and could you do this today? Like a modern man, get like 12 of your friends together and get some pointy sticks and go take down like an elephant? I don't think so. They were pretty sharp. So the other things that they hunted was this giant sloth. And you think, well, that's not something to hunt. I mean, it's just this giant mass like the blob. But I guess they would try to kill the babies, and then the mother sloth would come after them and shit. Anyway,
Yeah. And also they had the small-faced giant bear. We should
right?
get a picture of that and put on
Yeah.
there, man. That would keep me out of North America.
Well,
The mammoth, not so
it might
much,
keep you
man,
out
but
of
the
a
giant
cave.
bear.
It might, right? The bear cave. It might keep you out of a cave too, which was interesting because they were living in caves too. So they came into contact with the bear cave, cave bear, which is bigger than a polar bear, which today is the largest bear. So that was like a third bigger than a polar bear. So they were hunting and killing that. And it wasn't just a pointy stick, it was in fact the Clovis point, which I want to talk about just for a second, because that was technology. It was like magic. The Clovis point, people make them today because they're hobbyists and they do it. But they were pretty big. They were pointy. They had flutes. That was the commonality. They had this fluted part at the bottom where you could attach it to a spear to go hunt a mastodon. And that doesn't sound like much, but that was technology that was just incredible. And the other thing that was incredible is that it spread just all across North America, into southern Canada, into northern Mexico, and it did it in a relatively short period of time. Within like a couple thousand years, it was everywhere. So did
more like a couple hundred years.
Yeah.
The whole Clovis point only lasted 600 years.
Okay.
I mean, it's very. And that was before Amazon Prime, right? They had to like get this stuff across the country, right?
Right. So I think probably what happened was the mastodon went extinct. Either they were overhunted or the climate changed, and then it became Folsom Man. Folsom Man is around 10,000 years ago. They were still hunting megafauna, but the mastodons were gone. They were hunting these giant buffalo, basically. So they had
Bison.
So 10,000 years ago. So that was before. What was going on in Europe? Were there any pyramids yet? No. Were there Stonehenge? Maybe. The Stonehenge took centuries to build, so they were probably getting started on Stonehenge at that point.
I think they had like cave paintings in Spain. I don't know. They were not. I mean, that was a long time ago. I mean, Adam and Eve was only 6,000 years ago. So, and basically they didn't start building pyramids till like 5,000, 4 to 5,000 years ago. So no, there wasn't much going on in Europe either, but they did have agriculture going, and they were destined to they had beast of burden, cows and, and goats and sheep, which the unfortunately the people here didn't have. All they had was this megafauna that they killed off. So yeah, can I talk a little bit about that too? Because what I found interesting, that they didn't have, again, one of my misconceptions of all this stuff, that my ignorance that I didn't know about, was somehow I thought they were using like bow and arrows, right? Bow and arrows weren't around. What they had, when you go to a dog park and you see those people with those ball launchers, right? And it makes these like 50-year-old ladies throw like a major league pitcher, right? You can throw it. That's what they had. They had these little things called adolescents, and it's like
they
a spear. But it was
they were called Adele, that singer. No, the Adelaide. That was another magical piece of technology, because
that was magical, because they couldn't take down the can you imagine? So this was the big thing, right? Because if they were throwing, it was like a stick, and then they put the spear on the stick, and there was like a little hinge. I don't know what the hinge was made of. So when they threw it, it was like one of those super, dog launchers, and they could get this, and it was a spear. It wasn't like a bow and arrow. It was a spear, and that's why the Clovis points are like 6 to 7 inches long, right? If you go to Mexico now and you find an arrowhead, it's 2 or 3 inches long, a lot smaller. They're part of an arrow bow and arrow system that was going on. But these things were huge, and that they could take down a mammoth, right? And they could get this. They could get this. They rebuilt these things, right? And practice with them. You can go practice with them now. You can get one of these things going over 100 miles an hour, right? Which is, again, it's like a good major league pitcher. And these people are, athletics and smart. So they probably, once they figured that out, they probably did overhunt, the megafauna along with the climate change. They
And then to
they
think
ended
that
the Clovis,
right,
right? The
the other
Clovis culture
thing,
about 9,000 BC.
yeah, when they were making the Clovis points, I think we talked about this before a little bit, is that my theory, I'm like grabbing this theory like no one else has ever thought of it before, but specialization. So my idea was that there were engineers, there were like Folsom Point engineers that, designed the Folsom Points. And then, like you said, there was even further, like there were people that like chunked off the big piece of rock, and there were people that made it smaller. It was a whole assembly line thing going. And these people didn't hunt any mammoths. They were like, they had glasses and the little pocket protector, and they were designing these Folsom Points. There was no hunting mammoth, it was specialization. So I think that's the only way they could have done it. And I think that the obsidian, or wherever the Folsom Points were manufactured, those sites stayed active, for hundreds of years because those people lived there. They were it was like Intel basically, except you chipped on a rock.
Yeah. So So the other theory is the solution theory, the fact that they came the same rate the Vikings came, thousands, 10,000 years later, right? Vikings came through Greenland, right? Because most of these Folsom points or Clovis points are not found in New Mexico. They're found on the East Coast, right? And up north in the East Coast, right? If you see a map, I think the Great Courses has that map, right, where they show where these points are found. They're all over the East Coast, and there's like 20 in New Mexico and Arizona, right? So they think, well, probably they got it from the Europeans. But the fact is, the oldest ones are in New Mexico, right? The oldest ones are in northern Mexico. So they probably, it's like, yeah, it probably started in New Mexico, and it just caught on like wildfire. And the further it went, the more popular it got.
It's a lot like green chili, it's a lot like our red versus green chili.
Yeah. Like the best Indian food is in England, right? If you want to find the best Indian food, you go to England. So you want to find the best Clovis point, you go to Maine for some reason. That's where everybody, probably they got, maybe once they got this Clovis point, they'll go, I'm out of here, man. I'm tired of the desert. I found out I can hunt mammoth anywhere with this.
Yeah,
But the other thing I found interesting, I think it was from the Great Course. I forget which Great Course was. I think it's the one on linguistics. Was that there's a lot of the Navajo, right? The DNA. There's like three basic families of languages, right? And none of them relate to anything European. But there's this language that actually you can trace. There's a language family from people in Siberia and even down into India. There's that similarity of the languages. So it looks like, just linguistically, it looks like they came over the Bering Strait, because you can see like the similarity of languages, and also the haplotypes of the DNA. I mean, that's really clear. I mean, there is no European DNA in these people. It's all, it's all similar to the DNA coming over from Asia. And the other thing is, what I thought was interesting was the dental formation is similar to Asians and not Europeans, the way the teeth are in the skull. So, but it's still a question of, man, how did they? But then there's these sites down in South America that were there like 15,000 years ago. When they were supposed to be still up in Beringia.
Yeah,
What's up with that? How did they get there?
That's kind of where we stand, because that was the question. It's like the oldest site was in South America, which throws every theory out the window. But then just recently, within the last, I don't know, a few years, they discovered footprints at White Sands in New Mexico that date, they think, to 23,000 years. But so the dating is ridiculous. You don't know how old anything is. Carbon 14 is plus or minus, but they have like 3 other dating methodologies that hopefully will be more accurate. Do you know about those, or is that just too technical?
Yeah, no, they do have this fluorescent where they can actually check the fluorescence of dirt. Basically, that was buried, right? How much sun was shining on dirt, and then it got buried, and they can get it up and see how much sunlight, and from that they can determine how long it was buried. Um, the big ones, I mean, but that's pretty technical. They have obviously carbon 14, which is but it's plus or minus a couple hundred years, and they have to calibrate that. I mean, the most accurate doesn't go back that far is tree rings, right?
Yeah.
They can look at the tree rings and they can take that back 10,000 years. So they had trees, growing at least 4,000 years before creation. And then they had moss, moss on rocks. If you go to a cave, there's moss, and every year there's a new layer of moss. They can track that past thousands of years, right? And the other one is ice samples. You go up to the far north, you drill down there, you can get ice samples going back, maybe 100,000 years or something. I'm not sure. And with that, you can actually say what the atmosphere was like at that time. Right? So all these things, though one alone isn't enough, but the geological evidence, I think they got Beringia in, that 26,000 years, and the coming over, and the Clovis Point, the guy who found the Folsom Point. Can we talk about him for 2 seconds?
Yeah, he was a freed slave, wasn't he?
He was a black ex. I'm surprised he's not more famous, because he is like the coolest dude of this whole thing of studying this topic. He was like the coolest one of them all, right? He like blew away all these like fancy pants Smithsonian, Harvard archaeologists, right? Because he was a black ex-slave that was a rancher who's an amateur historian, amateur geologist, a bison hunter. He had all of the skill sets, so that when he found the Folsom bones, he goes, "This is not your normal bison. This is a bison antiquus. This is a bison 10,000 years old, and there's an arrow in it. There's a Clovis arrow in this bison bone, and that means, dudes, that we were here 10,000 years ago, right?" And the Smithsonians go, no. What do you know? You're some, black ex-slave, rancher
I think the
in New Mexico.
I think the Smithsonian dated that going back only like 3,000 years or something. It was just
3,000 years, exactly.
It was
exactly. They would put and it took him till like 1920 or 19, and he found it right in 1880 or something. He's an ex-slave, so it was after the war. But yeah, and finally they go, okay, you're right. So we have to mention his name. I wrote it down because I thought he was totally cool.
Haley will find it.
Do you remember his name?
Haley will find it.
Yeah, Haley will find it. Put your picture of him, because we got to mention him, because he was the first one, just an amateur. Well, he was a rancher, amateur archaeologist who really set. And after him, they found the Clovis man, and everybody was coming to New Mexico looking for arrows. So good job. He gets 5 points for Gryffindor. And he was. It's important to mention him.
Yeah, that's cool. I did want to mention one thing that I didn't know that I thought was interesting. It's like you think of archaic Neolithic art, the cave paintings with the petroglyph, and that stuff is amazing. But before that, there were charms. Like so here's like a tennis ball, but it was like a rock, and they would like carve these little delicate lines in it. It would be hand art, and you could like go show your other Clovis man, hey, look at my art. I carry it around with me. And if you think about it, that became what people refer to as charms now, or what was the other word? A talisman. So I don't know. I thought that was cool.
Talisman, yeah, talisman, yeah.
I thought that was
Yeah,
cool
yeah,
because
yeah,
it was
yeah.
like hand art. I'm going to carry my art around with me.
and they probably was using it as a projectile, right? Which, it's funny, there's no indications of this early phases, maybe just because they had so much space. There was no indication of any human on human violence, right? It's like what was, going on in Europe. They didn't get any Europe. They didn't actually get into any human on human violence until the late, mound building stages over in what is Louisiana now. Yeah, and
Or so the
there is that.
or so the archaeological record seems to depict. But they weren't writing anything down, so we don't know. It could have been a war.
Yeah.
All right. So
maybe that's why.
There's a lot of stuff that happens between Folsom and then really I'd like to just jump, because we're kind of running out of time. Jump to like the 12th century, because the ancestral pueblos, were around from the 12th century BC all the way to the present. So that culture is just phenomenal. We could talk about that maybe a little bit, Chaco Canyon and stuff. But the interesting thing is they're still around.
Well, yeah, I think we should spend another whole episode on pueblos and the mound builders and the people are there. But after the mammoth died out, it went into this part called the archaic period, right? Where it was after the Clovis and before civilization, right? And the one thing that I thought was rather disturbing, because I was thinking the natives as being close to nature or conservative with nature, lovers of nature and the nature gods, was the bison jumps, right? Where the mammoths and everything, they weren't using the Clovis point, but what they did is they herded. They didn't have horses yet, obviously, but they got all these bison running in one direction towards a cliff, and thousands and thousands of these bisons who were can't see beyond their nose were running over, and it wasn't like it wasn't a bison jump. They didn't jump. They were pushed.
They jump. They're like, oh, hey guys,
talk about
let's do the jump again.
It wasn't like the bisons were saying, let's go jump off a cliff. We're pushed off a cliff. And you can go to these sites now, and there's like a mile foot down of bones, right? Going back to ancient pythons all the way up to modern evolved bisons. I thought that was horrible until the very end of the period. They figured out they're going to run out of bison if they keep pushing off cliffs. So they actually built corrals, which I thought was a little nicer, right? They herded them in so they don't like run off cliffs, and then they let them run off cliffs one by one.
I want to clarify that. I want to clarify that. You keep saying, was it bison or was it mammoth? I don't know. It could have been either one.
It was bison. It was bison. This is after the mammoths are gone.
But they did the same. They did the same technique with mammoths too. They would chase mammoths off cliffs. But here, I want to go back to buffalo for a minute. I love all God's creatures. I do. But for the love of God, the buffalo are really not that smart. Like, so when the Native Americans later, when they had horses and bow and arrows, you could shoot, like there'd be a herd of buffalo. You could shoot a buffalo, one, it would fall, And then the buffalo would just like, oh, he's dead, and just keep on eating and not run. It's like, wow, you know what? You're lucky you didn't go extinct because you're kind of dumb. Anyway, sorry, Bison.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't. Yeah, no. But it's true. But if you put love based predicated on intelligence, we'd be eating humans, right? It's like there's there's a lot of stupid people out there.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that I think this happened a lot more in the eastern United States, but the archaic Paleo Indians at that time were using fire for land management. So what they would do, they would create pastures, they'd create habitats for deer to live so they could hunt them. And they did it primarily with fire. And it's interesting too, because those issues still are going on today. I think in the Northwest, there's Native American tribes that are going, hey, you know what? You guys should let us do the management because, you know, we knew how to do this and stuff. But I thought that was cool.
We've been doing it. We've been doing it for 20,000 years. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I guess we can kind of sum this up now. We should do another one, talk about the Pueblos and some of the other cultures. I guess we decided we're not going to do post-contact because we got to get ready. We got to prepare for an exciting, maybe multi-part series of the myths of Christmas. Bum, 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 bum. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. You know what? I like Christmas songs. I do. I'm sorry. You know what? I don't want to apologize. I like Christmas songs. I like the ones that are really like old and inappropriate. There's this. What's that one that?
Don, we now are gay apparel.
That's not bad, but the one where the guy won't let the girl leave. He's like, "Stay, there's chestnuts on the fire." She's like, "No, I gotta go," and he's like, "Oh, I'm."
Yeah, that's creepy. Yeah.
But there's so many great Christmas traditions around the world. Every culture today has their own Christmas traditions. People are like, oh, that's funny that they do that. No, what we do is funny. Everybody has their own crazy Christmas traditions, and they're just, some of them are wild. Like, we'll talk about the talk about
there were no Christmas trees in Bethlehem. There was no snow in Bethlehem.
Okay, but don't be a buzzkill. You know, we got to keep this upbeat. All right. Thank you, guys. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Go to the website. Buy some merch. We'll be back.
Goofy Historians is the funnest place to learn about history. Or is it the funniest? Does history repeat itself? Not really. But sometimes it kind of rhymes.